Today, I want to go over some of the less talked about ways that sexual trauma affects your brain and your sex life. Because there's so much guilt and shame associated with these, it often leaves victims feeling like there's something wrong with them. I made a list of the most common ones that I see in my office, and then I'll go over why you may experience some of these. You develop a love or loyalty for your abuser. Now, this is more your Stockholm syndrome when you are being held against your will. Then you can develop a love for the one that you are relying on to keep you alive. This is not, however, like trauma bonding, where you are able to leave if you were to choose to. You may be overly sexually active, having multiple partners. Now, when you have been sexually abused as a child, especially if this was by a caregiver, but if it was a close family member as well, you were taught that sex is love. When you associate sex with love, you will give yourself to partner after partner, just trying to feel that feeling of being wanted or desired or loved. You may never want sex or any form of physical intimacy. Now, the reason for this is pretty clear. If you were sexually abused growing up or at any point, you may now be turned off by sex. It may just simply be a reminder of what happened to you, and it may disgust you now, and this is very common as well. If you were forcefully raped or assaulted, you may now enjoy forceful sex. We'll go into that a little bit more later on. If you were a small child being sexually dominated by a parent, you may now want to be dominated sexually by a partner. You may enjoy multiple partners at one time. You may now be bisexual or attracted to same-sex partner. You may be attracted to people much younger or older than you. You may have experience with animals. Okay, I want to go into this one real quick because I will say this one is the hardest one for people to talk about. But first, I want to look at this from another perspective. Let's say you have a child that was physically abused, and now you see this child being aggressive toward animals. This child is simply acting out the aggression that he's receiving from his parents onto this animal that's weaker than him, smaller than him. And by doing this, he now feels like he has a sense of control. He feels like he has taken back some of his power. So it's not that this child is just hurting this animal because he hates animals. This child feels powerful and he feels control from this. And he's just projecting onto this animal, something that's smaller than him, what's happening to him. This is the same thing when it comes to sexual abuse. When you have someone that has been sexually abused, often they have this animal, it's smaller than them, they have control over it, and they may sexually harm this animal. Sexual abuse is almost never about having an orgasm or wanting sex. It is almost always about having control. Abusers seek out their victims, and they go for the ones that are weaker, smaller, and they feel like they can dominate. So when you have someone doing this to animals, they're simply acting out what's been done to them on something that is weaker and smaller than them, so they have a sense of control. You may watch pornography that is disturbing or violent. You may watch pornography that is parent with child or adult with minors. Okay, the reason that people tend to do this is because it's desensitizing. This is a minor example of how this happens, but a few years ago, I moved into this apartment and there was this dog next door, and this dog stayed in this little tiny pen outside, and he never got to leave that pen to get any exercise or anything. And he was a big dog in this tiny little pen on a concrete slab. There was no grass in there or nothing. And in the beginning, this bothered me, seeing this dog like this every day. But with time, it became my norm, and it no longer bothered me. It just became, this is what it is. And that's how we desensitize. And it's the same thing when you're watching porn like this, you become desensitized to it. And what happened to you, it kind of helps numb that. The problem with this is that most people, after watching this type of porn, they feel disgusted. They wonder, why am I watching this? And it really bothers them. Again, this is one way that your brain helps desensitize you to the trauma that you endured. And this last one I see more than anything else, people feel guilt and shame because the sexual abuse that they endured felt pleasurable. I can't stress this one enough. Just because it may have felt pleasurable does not mean that you wanted it. When you are being touched, the brain reacts, it will respond to pleasurable touch. And that means you could get an erection, you could get wet, you could have an orgasm. You have no control over how your brain responds to pleasurable touch. It doesn't matter if it's touch that you don't want. The brain doesn't know the difference. It still feels pleasurable. Abusers will even say, well, you must like it because you did get an erection or got wet or had an orgasm. This does not mean that you wanted it, you enjoyed it, or that you deserve to have this happen to you. In no way were you asking for it. And so you should not feel guilty about it. And I know this can cause some confusion because it is something that you really don't want. If I sit here and I rub your arm with my nails, I'm going to make goosebumps come up on your skin. If I sit here and hold a heater in your face, I'm going to eventually make you sweat. If someone is touching you in a pleasurable way, you still feel these sensations and the brain still responds. But this is nothing to feel guilty or shameful about. This is actually extremely common. But it doesn't mean you wanted it. I cannot stress that enough. Now, if some of these apply to you that are not illegal and are not harmful to you or anyone else, meaning once you are done, you feel no guilt, no shame, no regret, and you are okay with everything, then do you. However, if these apply to you and they are illegal and they are hurting someone else, you need to seek out therapy to get help. Although you may have not gotten yourself in this position and it is the brain's way of responding, it now is your place to heal those parts of you so you don't go on and hurt others. Again, if you have been through sexual trauma and you are experiencing some of these things, stop beating yourself up. Stop living in guilt and shame. These things are actually really common. But you can heal the past and you can heal the damage that the trauma done to the brain so you can go on to have a healthy sex life.